G'day guys, Shane here from Firearm Owners United. Today we've got a very special guest. We've got Evan Todd. Thanks for joining us today, Evan.
Good morning, thank you. Yeah.
So we recently saw your interview on the Today Show over here. I'd like to apologise for the way the media handled that one. A lot of
Thank you.
firearm owners here were quite appalled by the way it was handled, but it's not exactly unexpected.
Yeah.
We've got a very strong anti-gun presence in the media, unfortunately, in Australia, pushing a narrative against firearms and firearm
So do we.
ownership. Yeah, well, CNN, a good example there, I guess.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, life before Columbine, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Life before Columbine was pretty standard American, upbringing. I played football. I was in the Boy Scouts. I wrestled. Littleton was relatively a small town feel, close to the mountains. We'd go camping, backpacking, hiking, fishing. We played soccer and baseball and football on the weekends, and it was pretty normal. And yeah, I had no complaints.
So you obviously grew up, hunting, camping. So I grew up around firearms, very familiar with firearm handling and safe handling practices, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I grew up. I was around firearms. It wasn't a big presence in my life, but we did shoot them in the Boy Scouts. We learned the safety. All the safety aspects of firearms. We'd shoot, targets and skeet and trap, and we would go. And Littleton was a fairly prominent area that a lot of hunters. People would be hunters, and so yeah, I was familiar with them, but I wasn't, immersed in them, if you could say that.
Yeah. And would you say that that sort of changed now, or would you say that you're more immersed in firearms and ownership of firearms now than you were when you were younger?
Yeah, well, I definitely, yeah, on many levels, mainly because of what happened, I started diving into the law and understanding the reason and why it was such a big deal in our Constitution with the Second Amendment. Before Columbine, I never considered those things. A firearm was just a hunting tool or, something to go target practice. So yeah, after Columbine is when I really started questioning firearms and firearm laws for sure. So I'm definitely more immersed, and I am a gun owner. I do shoot fairly regularly, and then I hunt whenever I do get blessed to have some time to do so.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so obviously, as a survivor of the Columbine shooting, that would have impacted you quite substantially, um, which is more than understandable. Is that something that you're often comfortable talking about, like the events of the day, sort of thing? Or?
It's I I started talking about it early on just because people were curious of what happened, and perhaps it's been therapeutic to share my story, but I also felt an obligation to share my story, to try and help other people, and also as I looked at the political situation, it was also maddening that people would use such a traumatic event to push their political agendas, namely gun control. And that was something that I tried to shy away from a little bit early on because I thought it was more like I said over and over. I think, it's a heart and soul issue when someone goes and murders other people. And so I, I think I I did it out of defense for liberty. I think is the best way to put it, because I'm grateful for the freedoms that we have, and honestly the things that liberty provides not only to America but the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, after that, you've mentioned that you found it therapeutic in a way to discuss these issues. Is that what inspired you to take up your career in speaking about these issues, public speaking about these issues, and your advocacy for firearm ownership? Or
Yeah, it spread, and and I talk about a lot of different topics. So I talk to middle schools and high schools about decisions and overcoming adversity and character development. I've spoken and done fundraisers with the Boy Scouts and churches, ministries. So there's a lot of different avenues and aspects that I talk about. But it kind of snowballed. I never intended to do it, but once my story got out, just kind of one thing led to another, and I bounced around. And I guess I wouldn't even call it a career because I never took it seriously. I always, held a job in another career field, and quite frankly, I've gone somewhat broke being so outspoken, because it takes a lot of time and effort to do this, and and that's not why I do it. I do it because I believe in protecting life and liberty, and that's what it boils down to.
yeah, great. And have you had much contact with other survivors of Columbine and discussed your views in that regard? And if so, how has it been received by them? Like, do they support your view, or is it mixed? Or
It's definitely mixed. Columbine was a school of 2,000 students, so it's a fairly large school, and one of the largest in the state of Colorado. And there's a lot of point of views. So there's quite a few people on both sides of the ball. There's a huge support. One of the notable is Patrick Neville. He's a local state senator, congressman, and he's a Columbine survivor. He's also an Army veteran and a huge supporter of the Second Amendment and personal liberties. And he's very outspoken, and there's quite a few who are outspoken. I know of there's Columbine survivors that own gun shops, who are firearm instructors, police officers, Army, Navy, Marines, and so there's quite a large number of people who support the Second Amendment and gun ownership that have survived it. I'm one of the few that's a little bit more visible and outspoken about it, but there's a large number of us.
okay, excellent. And how did you sort of come to the idea that firearm ownership was, well, I suppose what I'm trying to ask is how did you not fall on the side of gun control? Like, what was it that sort of was a deciding factor there? We see after a lot of other shootings, especially in Australia after our Port Arthur massacre, a lot of people instantly jumped on the anti-gun bandwagon, banned the guns and saved lives. What was the catalyst that sort of led you to fall on the other side of the coin?
Well, I think because what happened at Columbine was so destructive and just life changing. The whole world, you go from a 15-year-old just playing football in a small town to the whole world's eyes are looking at you. I had a lot of introspection where I looked at, I questioned everything really, and guns was one of those things that I questioned, because that was a narrative after Columbine as well, that these guns did it, and I looked in these two killers' eyes, and there was something different there, and that's one of the things that drove me down that path, because I had access to guns too. I there's guns in almost every home. Back in the late, mid and late '90s, people kept guns in wood cabinets with glass fronts, and yeah, there was a key on it, but you could easily get a gun if you wanted to, and people weren't, murdering each other at the rate that had happened. So, it was a thing that I questioned, and as I dug into the topic, I started to realize the importance of gun ownership and in the correlation to freedom and liberty. And in societies where gun ownership is limited and restricted, things can go down a totalitarian, slippery slope real quick. And I think the fact that America still holds on to the Second Amendment not only provides freedom for America, but it also provides freedom for the rest of the world. It's a place that people can escape to. Since our founding, people have been flooding into America, running from totalitarian and murderous regimes. When there have been totalitarian and murderous regimes, America has been able to stand up to them, and because of that, I believe that the Second Amendment, all of our Bill of Rights are very important, but the Second Amendment is a huge one that is clearly under attack for control issues, control reasons.
Well, it's definitely something that's envied in Australia, particularly amongst a lot of firearm owners. Having a Bill of Rights there. So
it reminds me how blessed I am.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the firearm owners that I speak to, they definitely envy the Second Amendment. But even the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, the First
Yep.
is very much envied here, because being able to speak out about things has been somewhat troublesome. We've got anti-discrimination laws and things like that, where if you hurt somebody's feelings, you're looking at prison time, sort of things. So,
well, they're trying that here too. So
yeah, but yeah, we're very, very envious of the Second Amendment. Most certain circles of the firearm owner community, others not so much, but each to their own, I guess. I noticed just briefly while you were discussing your ideas and how you came to them that you referred to them as the killers, and in other interviews you've referred to them as they or them or the murderers, or never by their names. Is there reasoning behind that? Is it personal belief, or is it something else? Or
well, that's something that has developed over the years. Early on, I would refer to them by name when I talked about them, and as the years went on, I noticed there was a lot of mainly young, impressionable, disturbed and kids that were looking to idolize them. Some who've actually gone on to commit similar heinous acts, and some who have just been, keyboard jockeys who just think it's cool to idolize these two. And as they became more, I guess, infamous over the years, I made a conscious decision to stop calling them by their names and call them by what they were, which is murderers. They don't deserve the fame and attention, and it's no way to get fame and attention. And I think there has been cases of people committing these acts because obviously they're homicidal and suicidal, but they're also looking to live in infamy. And I'm not going to do that. I don't like to refer to any of these murderers by name, and I'll continue to do so down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that there's sort of a media perpetuated pop icon sort of culture surrounding these types of people? Do you think that's possibly a motivator?
I think it is. There's this weird need that is permeating society to be famous, and people will go on to YouTube and eat laundry detergent to try and be famous, and do stupid acts just because they want to be famous. And little do they know that it's not always fun or a good ride when you are known and in the public sphere. Kids, I think they look up to the people who are in the news and in the media and on the YouTube, and they want to emulate them. And that's one of the things too, since Columbine, is no one really ever condemned them. Everything was prefaced with, well, they were bullied, or they were going through a phase, or they were into this or that, or very few people just came out and said, no, this is wrong. If murdering innocent people is wrong and it should not happen. And that narrative never really came out of society. It was always, and people, I think, have found justification over the years saying, well, I'm bullied. So that's one of the things, it's one of my pet peeves that since Columbine is that narrative drove, it basically made murder second to bullying, and that's not it. Bullying is wrong and it's an issue and all that. It's another topic I talk about, but murder is the one thing that I thought we could all come as human beings, no matter your political agenda, we should all just come together and condemn murderers when they come, when these things happen. It's wrong. No, tell your children this is wrong. If you have these kind of thoughts, it's not right. Reach out. There's something going on, and there's help available for you. It's, I don't know. I just went on a rant on bullying, but
No, that's fine. I mean, it's obviously a very important issue, and it obviously does play into the mass shooting debate and discussion. But it's interesting that you say that nobody's turned around and said, let's call it what it is, let's call them murderers, rather than trying to excuse and justify it. I mean, I know a lot of people who are bullied. I've been bullied myself. I regret that I've been a bully myself. Yet I never felt the need to go and shoot anybody, and a lot of my friends who have been bullied never felt that need either. I don't think that bullying is a justification for it. However, I do feel that I agree with you that by using that as a justification, it's just enabling people and justifying people to go and commit these heinous acts. Yeah. So, I definitely agree with you on that point, and I think a lot of other people will too. It's just nobody's ever really sort of thought about it in that way. So it's interesting that you said that. So speaking about that, this is obviously something that you discuss when you go on your speaking tours, at the churches and community centres and schools and so on. What other topics are discussed during this issue? Like, is it mainly topics of liberty and firearm ownership and consequences, or are there other aspects of the conversation as well?
Yeah, with middle school and high school kids, it's also talking about just making it through. The tough times come and tough times go, and I also talk about going through Columbine was one of my tough times, and I don't think I would have recovered without help. And so I talk about how the world there's filled with good people that are willing to reach out and help you if you need help, whatever you're going through. If you just reach out, people tend to help. And that's one of the things, is just overcoming adversity and putting perspective on life, and tough times will come and tough times will go, but people continue on, and you'd be surprised what you can endure if you just really put your mind to it and push through. So there's that, and I talk about obviously the freedom, the liberty, character. Advocate for first aid training and trauma training. That was first aid training, something I got in the Boy Scouts, and it helped on that day. Firearm safety is a huge thing that I think they should teach in schools, frankly, but they should teach every child about firearm safety. And so there's a lot of aspects. And then obviously with the youth ministries, just talk about the redemption and saving grace of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Okay. Are you involved in any firearms training courses? Like, are you instructor or anything like that as well, or?
No, never instructor. I guess I could be called a unofficial instructor. I don't know if I should even say that. But every time I talk to people about guns, I talk about the safety. Always guns, always loaded, always pointing in a safe direction. Those are the first two rules that everyone should know. But I recently teamed up with a organization that I'm going to be working with and looking forward to seeing where the road leads. It's a program called Faster Colorado, and it's a program that's training teachers and school staff to how to respond to active shooter situations and trauma, triage, all kinds of different training on those levels. But it's a really cool program that's going to actually, I think, save lives, because it's going to allow teachers to have the training. The law is already in place so that teachers can carry concealed weapons in schools in Colorado. And this way they'll be able to confront an active shooter if it ever arises. So I'm looking forward to see the training and where this training will lead for Colorado schools.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's really good to see something that's proactive about making a difference, rather than there's almost a perverse commercialization on mass shootings now. We see bulletproof backpacks and like little bulletproof shelters being built into schools and things. And my first thought was that was just a perverse sort of commercialization of it, and just a cash cow for people. Obviously, being able to handle a situation rather than relying on a product is a better solution. Do you feel that, you obviously feel the same way because you're being involved in these sort of courses? So, but do you think that the reliance on like bulletproof backpacks and products like that is just a diversion away from the issue, and B, just a commercialization of it, or do you think that they are a viable product?
That's tough to say. It's sad that those products obviously exist at all, but it's also I think there are people with good intent trying to solve this from many angles, and it just shows that there's a head and heart issue that some schools have tried to take up over the years, and they focus more on bullying because they think bullying causes mass shootings, which I completely disagree. There's a lot more that goes into it, and I think that when they get serious about teaching values and principles again, that and namely that life is sacred, and it'll curb the problem of mass shootings. But there's also other political and cultural aspects of it too, that 92% of these mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. So that's an issue where people know that there's lots of unarmed people, and that's where these murderers target. So when a school shooting starts, it doesn't matter if there was gun laws or no gun laws. When it starts, the only thing that needs to happen is to neutralize that threat as quickly as possible. And the only way you're going to do that is with a firearm. I guess I should say the best way you're going to do that is with a firearm. There have been cases of teachers and parents tackling firearms. There was a Boy Scout actually up in Oregon, I think it was, or Washington State, who tackled a school shooter in the mid to late 90s and held him down. But that's the thing. That's the first thing we need to focus on is neutralizing the threat and protecting and saving lives. All the other stuff is preventative measures, and we can deal with that as well. But first, we need to protect our kids and protect our schools, and I think that alone would be a deterrent to some of these would-be killers. They know that they'll be met with force. So, there's that aspect of it. But I think there's other things that the metal detectors, the bulletproof windows, all that. That's fine. It's for me, it's a canary in the coal mine. I think you don't need that kind of restrictions. I think also it should be left up to the communities. If local communities want to lock down their schools and build big walls and hire massive security, that's fine too. That's up to them. It's their children. It's their decision how to treat that, and I'm completely fine with that. But that's one of the reasons I think the gun-free zone law in America needs to be repealed. It's a national law, and it's prohibiting in some places from people protecting their schools. And it disarms a lot of law-abiding citizens when they take their kids to school. They have to disarm, which would be another deterrent. So I think they need to repeal that law and leave it up to the local communities on how to deal with school safety and school security.
Yeah. Well, you've raised two interesting points there. The first that we can't protect our children in schools. Obviously, you can't protect children in schools over there because of the gun-free zones. Over here, we have a common saying, we protect our money, our politicians, our banks, our jewelry, even trophies for our sports people with guns, but we're not allowed to protect our homes, our families, or our lives with the same use of force. And it's totally ridiculous over here. I mean, our priorities are upside down, in my opinion. But then it's also interesting, you're talking about building bulletproof windows and high walls and metal detectors and everything else like that. It's almost as if these children are almost being indoctrinated to go to school in a prison. It's almost creating a prison environment. I remember when I was at school, there weren't even any fences around it. And these days I see the same school and it's surrounded by fences and walls and things like that now. So, I'm really horrified by that.
Yeah, well, and I think it does change their perspective of the world when they're locked down like that. It's and that's the other thing with the mass shootings is, gun ownership in America has been climbing for, I think, 30 years. And violent crime, murder, all those statistics have been falling. And even mass shootings have been declining since, from 99 after Columbine, they had been declining for many years. And I think some of the media hysteria makes it seem as though it's an epidemic and it is an issue because as long as one child is being murdered in the school, I'll do my part to try and help protect and save those lives. But I think it's also trumped up in a fashion that things are so incredibly bad, but it's just another media narrative to push their gun control agenda. kids are actually safer today than they were when I was in school. And there's less homicide, murder. Things have gotten better, and gun ownership has skyrocketed. Our streets are safer, our cities are safer, barring the ones that have insane gun control laws like Chicago and other places that their murder rate is through the roof, but their gun control is also massive. So people don't have the right to protect themselves, their families, their loved ones, or their homes.
Yeah. Yeah, so, sorry, you brought up Detroit and Chicago and places like that, and one thing I've noticed coming up in the media is that they discuss um, it's the fault of the states around these areas that have the loose gun laws that causes the gun crime in places like Detroit and Chicago. That people are leaving these places to go buy guns elsewhere and come back. Um, wouldn't these people be subject to background checks and things like that anyway? The current federal background checks anyway? Or?
Yeah, they're subject to the background checks. They're and they're not buying guns. They're not buying guns in legal manners. They're buying them off the streets. They're buying them behind closed doors. But the fact is that they know that they're the ones with the firearms and the other people aren't, and that's a huge reason that they do it. And it's also, and that's the other thing is, through the 90s and on, some of the gang type, the gang life, I guess you'd call it, was glorified in TV, movies, and I think that has had a ripple effect into some communities through the years, whether they recognize it or not. But that was glorified for many years as being tough and cool, and I think that permeates in it, and it has an effect on society for many years to come. So that's another narrative and education point that needs to happen. That and when you look at Chicago, and people hate talking about Chicago because it goes against all of their gun control measures, but you look at Chicago, and it's a lot of young people who are being killed and murdered, and they're being killed and murdered over very petty and small things. So there's obviously no respect for life. They disregard human life over disrespect over the smallest things, and for some reason they don't find that as a concerning issue. They'd rather take the firearms away from law-abiding citizens from thousands of miles away that have no effect or impact on what's happening there. Yeah. And my heart breaks for Chicago. That is a tough situation. There's other pockets in similar situations, but it's not the guns there either that are the problem. Mm-hmm. I'd say it's the politicians that create the culture. Yeah. Destruction that are the problem.
Mm-hmm. So obviously these people have such a low regard for human life. Obviously laws mean absolutely nothing to them. It kind of proves the point that throwing more laws at a problem isn't really going to solve anything, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for instance, look at Columbine. The two that committed that heinous act, I think, broke 30-something laws. Gun laws. They didn't care about the laws. It was a gun-free zone. At the time, America had an assault weapons ban. Assault weapons were banned in America when Columbine happened, and it didn't stop Columbine from happening. You can put, last time I checked, murder's illegal, but people still murder. So, the laws aren't going to stop people from doing it. It may deter some. And there's a law on murder, obviously, and other things, because there should be consequences for those types of actions. But the laws don't stop people. It's free will. People have the choice to do what they want, and yeah, I mean, law. You have to change the heart and the soul and the decision of people before you solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Australia is quite often held up as the envy of the world for their gun laws and how we haven't had mass shootings, despite the fact that we've had several. We had one
Just
recently.
recently.
Yeah, the mass killing in Margaret River, unfortunately. A very sad situation, but um, it's just it's one of those really sad things that happens. But not to cheapen that, but there's been a lot of other mass killings that have occurred in Australia for the last 20 odd years that were committed not using firearms. A couple of years ago, a woman killed 8 children with a knife. There was a backpackers hostel fire in a place called Childers, and I think it was about 13 people or something like that. There's been several mass killings in Australia since, and they don't seem to receive the same attention or are not utilised to drive a narrative because there's no narrative behind it, because there's no glamour in banning matches or knives, basically. And I think that that's a very good example of where people are missing the point there. They're looking for something to do an easy solution. Um, but yeah, I
Yeah.
think it sort of highlights that point. So.
Well, even before your ban, Australia's crime rate, murder rate was still relatively low from the stats that I looked at, and the ban has done very little to curb. There was a slight drop immediately after in some crime rates, but they've risen to the same, I think, or even slightly higher than levels before the ban, if I remember correctly. And you're right, people will turn from firearms to knives to, I mean, look at England. England is having a stabbing and knife epidemic right now that they're thinking about taking away kitchen and steak knives because there's just such an issue. Unless you ban every piece of metal, every stick and rock, put mittens on people so that they can't you're still going to have murder. You can't ban the instruments away, and people will find ways to murder. Look at 9/11. They use planes. You look at Nice, France. They use trucks, and people are using automobiles to kill hundreds at a time. Bombs. When there's a will, there's a way. Unfortunately, and it's sad that people think that they can control people's freedom and think that it's going to turn out right in the end. I think Australia is unfortunate because of the ban, and I'm actually glad that Australian people, by and large, from what I've seen, are great people, and I think that's one of the things that's been a blessing to Australia. But limiting personal freedom and liberties never turns out well. They'll continue down the road of tyranny, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that, actually. But while we're talking about laws, what are the firearm laws like in Colorado at the moment as far as conceal or open carry? Like, are permits required, or is there mandatory training or anything like that? Or?
So in Colorado, you have to have a permit to concealed carry. It's a shall issue state, which basically means if you do the background check, you go through a class showing you're competent with firearms and you understand firearm laws. You can, the local sheriff has an obligation; he shall issue the permit unless there's very few, I mean, there are instances where they'll not issue, but they're very few. They shall issue if you pass all the background and the test and all that. Open carry in Colorado is legal with or without a permit. You can carry a loaded firearm, open carry, holstered. Same thing with a rifle. You can open carry a rifle. Rifles cannot be loaded. They're, as far as the carry concealed weapons permit in Colorado, there's about 400,000 permit holders just in the state of Colorado who are law-abiding, obviously, carrying concealed weapons every day into public spaces, stores, churches, malls. And there are some restrictions on where you can carry. Obviously, the gun-free zones, which apply to elementary, middle school, and high schools. We did pass in Colorado campus carry, so it's legal to carry firearms on college campuses. College students can carry, which has, I think, definitely helped on a lot of the crime rates. As far as gun laws go, we have been, because of Columbine and Aurora, which was another mass shooting, we've been the target of many gun control groups. And I think it was in 2013 they passed a magazine limit. So instead of the standard 30-round clips or 30-round magazines. I've listened to them so much, I'm starting to talk like them. But the standard 30-round magazines are now banned in Colorado. You can only use a low-capacity 15-round magazine. There are some exceptions as far as, if they were grandfathered in, they're still legal. If you owned them before that.
But doesn't that just mean that you carry more magazines?
Yeah, I mean, and it does. They'll carry more magazines, and proficient shooters can swap out just as fast as at 15 to 30. But it was a political point on them, and they, it's a death by 1,000 cuts, so they'll just chip away at it. It's and that Magpul, I don't know if you're familiar with Magpul, but they're a firearm accessory, and they made magazines, and they were based in Colorado, and that drove them out of the state. They moved to Texas, where they knew that at least for now, that their rights wouldn't be trampled on anymore. There's that. There was also, they passed it was pushed by Gabby Giffords and Newtown, Bloomberg. You know the names, all the big gun control advocacies that are paying, that are funding throughout the world the gun control measures, and they pushed a universal background check in Colorado too. So any firearm, private sale or not, has to go through a background check. Can't sell a firearm to your friend or neighbor or even a family member without a background check anymore. So those are a couple more laws that they passed that which wouldn't have changed much of anything, but they're on the books now. So
right. Speaking of Anytown and Bloomberg and so on, because of your outspoken views, do you ever have organisations like that show up to any of your events where you're talking about firearm ownership, and do any of them sort of come and sort of protest and try and encourage people to boycott your speeches and your talks? And
no,
like that, or?
no. I wish I was that prominent, or I don't know if I should say I wish I was that prominent that people are boycotting and protesting my speeches, but by and large, I know for a fact that there's a few of these organizations who know who I am, but they definitely avoid me like the plague. They have basically, if they act like I don't exist, then they can just go on with their narrative. But yeah, I've never had most of my engagements have been pretty civil. There's people who disagree, and I have no problem talking, debating, question and answers, and I do question and answers at almost every speech that I give. With exception to some of the keynote type fancier banquets or whatnot. But yeah, question and answers. I love people asking questions and debating and actually trying to delve into this issue and tackle the real issues and learn and grow instead of just try and control and take away. But yeah, no protests yet. If I get protests, I'll film it and throw it up because that means I'm getting more popular.
Excellent. We'll be looking forward to that. Um, do you find that when you do have these engagements with people like that, do you feel that you do get through to them, or do you feel that they sort of just shut down and don't really want to listen because you're sort of challenging what they believe in?
Yeah, a little of both. I've had really good experiences, people coming up afterwards who have changed their views on certain things, and which I'm grateful for. That I've changed my views on things, other topics as well over the years. I don't pretend to know the answer to everything, but I like to keep an open mind and the possibility that there's a better way, or with more information you have another realization of something. So I have definitely spoken to people where they do look at firearms differently, because a lot of the narrative for a lot of people too who in certain communities, the only narrative they're getting is through the news and through the TV and movies. And when they start getting out and actually seeing that firearm owners are, everything from your local, dentist to doctor to teachers, you name the profession, whether they're a mail carrier or whatnot, there's firearm owners in almost every walk of life. And when people start to realize that in their churches are firearm owners, that they realize that there's not the stigma around firearm owners. They realize that firearms aren't bad; it's people that are bad, that can be bad. And so I've definitely, it's one of the more rewarding things is when people realize that that it's the head and the heart, not the hunk of metal that's causing damage.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're breaking down, I suppose, the vilification of people based on their ownership of an inanimate object.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we face very strongly in Australia. A lot of the time, we've got some very prominent anti-gun personalities in Australia. Any time that they're challenged on social media by organisations such as Firearm Owners United or Sporting Shooters Association, or Shooters Fishers Farmers Party, etc. It seems straight away people want to jump to the conclusion that we're gun nuts or rednecks or wild murdering gun-toting maniacs and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
They instantly leap to the worst possible conclusion. And
Yeah.
the sad thing is that over here it's very hard to get through to these people to convince them to understand that we're just regular people who just enjoy a different sport.
Mm-hmm.
We enjoy hunting, we enjoy target shooting. We're not murderers.
Yeah.
We're not maniacs, for the better part of it. So I mean, as with any sort of section of society, there's always a very small percentage who are ruining it for everyone else through their poor decisions. But the community as a whole.
And that just shows how the gun control side will either use emotional tactics after tragedy to push their agenda, or they'll vilify the people who do speak out, and they'll try and destroy their credibility or whatever they can to silence people. And so there's constant attacks on that front. But that just shows that they can't stand on their own leg, that their argument is weak in the end, and liberty and freedom ultimately will win in the end. They can attack, they can demonize, they can do what they want to gun owners, but the vast majority of law-abiding gun owners are good people who not only own guns but do good things, and that's huge, and that's something to remember.
Yeah. Great. Well, I've just run out of time, so I'm going to finish it up there, actually, mate. So,
Shane, I appreciate it. It was very nice speaking with you guys in Australia. Hope all is well. Keep up the good fighting.
We're going to keep fighting, mate, and thank you very much for your time. It's been very much appreciated, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks, you too.
All right, thanks a lot. Cheers, mate.
All right.